All right, I would expect this to be the best college football game of the week. The most talent on the field, looking at both football teams. Talking Georgia, South Carolina, this has emerged as rivaling the Georgia-Florida game, and also Florida taking on South Carolina. Between those three teams, they have dominated the SEC Eastern Division in recent years. So to talk some Dogs and Gamecocks, we bring in Tapp of SB Nation's Garnet and Black Attack. Connor, it's amazing how 1 week completely changes the national perception. So South Carolina comes in, top 10 team preseason. They get lit up by Kenny Hill. Sure, they don't look good, and that's got to be of great concern. Georgia has a tremendous second half against Clemson. Not a complete game, but pulled away in the second half, and suddenly people love Georgia, talking national championship, and South Carolina seems to be this also-ran in the SEC at this point.
Yeah, it's sort of weird. I've been, if South Carolina's schedule were even constructed differently, and some of the easier games on the schedule came instead of the two more difficult games against Texas A&M and East Carolina, South Carolina fans would probably be on top of the world right now if we opened against Furman and South Carolina State or something. But as it is, difficult loss to Texas A&M. That exposed a lot of problems with the defense and the offense, and I do think that we saw some incremental improvement from week 1 to week 2. So yeah, I do think that there is. Well, on one hand, people are kind of expecting Georgia to run all over South Carolina, and I do think if one team is going to blow out the other or win by couple of touchdowns, is probably Georgia, but at the same time, I think this is going to be a pretty closely fought game. South Carolina's defense, they're figuring out some personnel stuff. We saw in the East Carolina game some of those changes that were made in the secondary, switching to Chris Moody and T.J. Gurley at safety, putting Rico McWilliams at cornerback. That sort of solidified some of the bigger problems that we saw against Texas A&M. Is it perfect? No, but I think it's a pretty significant improvement from week 1 to week 2. The big thing for me on defense is going to be, is that defensive front able to get any kind of penetration against Georgia's offensive line? And if that's a matchup that South Carolina gets absolutely manhandled in, the Gamecocks might not be able to hang around in this one because of what Todd Gurley is able to do. Potential for Georgia to win by a couple of scores, but I think South Carolina is getting better from week to week. Had that tough game early, but while that does count as a loss, unfortunately, at least you find out some of the flaws early in the season rather than getting into week 3 and 4.
Yeah, unfortunately, if you're looking to win the SEC East, this is probably the deal right here. This, because of the week 1 loss, you could possibly get away with losing to Georgia and hoping for some help, but this would pretty much close the deal. Let's stay on the theme that you brought up with Gurley and with the South Carolina defense getting shredded in week 1, showing some improvement against an East Carolina team that's not SEC elite caliber, but still a very good football team, one of the top probably 30 or 35 teams in the country. So either South Carolina commits to selling out on Gurley, loading the box, and saying we got to stop the #1 running back in the country by most people's standards, or they expose themselves in the secondary that's been a weak spot and put Hutson Mason to the task, who's shown to be a pretty decent quarterback. I don't know that he's Aaron Murray at this point, but he's not completely inexperienced. He threw for 300 yards in the bowl game last year and wasn't asked to do too much against Clemson because Gurley did so much. So kind of your thoughts about the matchup issue that you have, selling out on Gurley, exposing the secondary, or possibly getting beat up and grounded out versus Gurley and Keith Marshall and company, Nick Chubb as well.
Yeah, I mean, I almost think you've got to put a little bit more faith in the defensive backfield than the Gamecocks seem to in weeks 1 and 2, because you gotta commit to stopping Todd Gurley, Nick Chubb. Sony Michel, just the endless list of very good running backs for Georgia. I mean, you have to, and I don't know that South Carolina even, selling out to stop the run will be able to do that. The defensive line right now is such a weakness, particularly at defensive end, where South Carolina is just so undersized at the moment. Darius English, 241 pounds at defensive end, is just something that we're not used to seeing at South Carolina after years of David Clowney, Chaz Sutton, and Devin Taylor. So you got to commit to try to stopping Todd Gurley as the primary option, or else I don't think South Carolina really is going to have a chance to hang around, because even last year with Jadeveon Clowney, Chaz Sutton, Kelsey Quarles, Georgia pretty much ran out almost the entire fourth quarter on one long drive. So it's South Carolina had troubles last year. They could have troubles this year.
Yeah, exactly. That was the game. Georgia got like a 4-point lead, was able to run it out with that long drive, and on the other end, you go on a long drive late in that football game, and they make the goal line stand to pretty much seal it, and then take over from there. Talking about top-notch running backs, Mike Davis coming off an exceptional year. There is a talk of Heisman candidacy. He's off to a rough start, primarily because of injuries, and he's nicked up. So what do we know about Mike Davis at this point, and how much do you expect to see Brandon Wilds?
I think you'll see some Brandon Wilds, just because that's just how the running back rotation has gone, even when Mike Davis has been fully healthy. And I do think he is as close to full health as can be expected at this point. He had a good game against East Carolina. He didn't start, but he came in and ran for 101 yards and a few touchdowns, and caught a few passes out of the backfield as well. So I think you'll pretty much see Mike Davis full go, unless another injury happens during the course of the game. And South Carolina made some, still sort of shuffling some pieces around on the offensive line. In the last game, Will Sport started at right guard, but then in place of Cody Waldrop. But after South Carolina had those two horrible drives to start the game, and then switched back to Cody Waldrop at right guard, and things seemed to be a little bit better after that. So how is Georgia might be. I mean, Texas A&M might have a good defense, but I think Georgia's defensive front might probably be the best one that South Carolina has seen so far. So it'll be interesting to see if South Carolina, who was able to run the ball pretty effectively in the second half against East Carolina when they really needed to run out the game, if they'll be able to have that same kind of success against Georgia. But as far as Mike Davis, should be good. I still think you'll see some more Brandon Wilds, maybe even some Dave Williams, the speedster freshman, who Gamecock fans were promised they'd get to see some last week. Ended up not really happening so much. He didn't do a whole lot on the few plays that he was in there. So you'll see a few running backs other than Mike Davis, but he should be full go.
So, Connor, you bring up the Georgia defense. The parts seem to be in place to have an exceptional defense. They always have great recruiting, but in the past they've had the all-star performers, the all-conference performers, but as a unit, good but not great. They had a great second half against Clemson. We wouldn't expect Clemson to be quite as prolific on offense as they've been in the past, so maybe that wasn't a stern test. Dylan Thompson's been erratic. We know that he has all the talent to make the NFL throws, so Dylan Thompson against this Georgia defense, and what do we need to see? Because he might be the guy that needs to pull the trigger 40 times to win this game.
Yeah, Dylan Thompson needs to have a great game if South Carolina is going to win. That and the how South Carolina's defensive line does against Georgia's offensive line are the two biggest keys to this game to me. Dylan Thompson does not look good, and I almost came out of the East Carolina game with more concerns about the offense going forward than the defense, because Dylan Thompson's throws early in the game, particularly, are just really erratic, and it seems to be the same issue every time, where he is just overthrowing open receivers and just not having good ball placement on throws to open receivers, and it's costing South Carolina first downs and keeping them from moving the chains and keeping that young and experienced defense off the field. And as the game went on against East Carolina, he got better as the coaching staff seemed to ask him to do less. South Carolina went to this inside zone running game / bubble screen package play, and he seemed to be able to, throw the bubble screen much better than the the post route at various points during the game. But at the same time, after South Carolina ran that play maybe like 10 times in a row, and then after that, he seemed to get into a bit of a groove and be able to hit some of those harder throws. So I would look for South Carolina, hopefully, to put Dylan in a better place to get into a rhythm early against Georgia with some easier, more manageable throws, because he needs to be accurate. And he did get more accurate. He hit Mike Davis on this really beautiful wheel route late against East Carolina to give the Gamecocks their final touchdown that they scored in that game. So Dylan Thompson is a big key. He's got the receivers to do it. He has the offensive line to give him the protection. It's just a matter of, can he be accurate with his throws? He has the arm strength to make it, and he just needs to get these mechanical issues worked out and get calmed down back there.
Connor Tapp of SB Nation's Garnet and Black Attack. Connor's in Columbia for the big game, so we appreciate you, Connor, taking some time out for us, getting us all prepped up for the best game in college football, or at least the best matchup this weekend, Georgia, South Carolina. So enjoy the weekend, enjoy the game.
All right, thanks, Mark. Happy to do it.